Today, let us return to that magical, wonderful, amazing place known as the island of Sodor, which is definitely real in all of our hearts. Last year, we talked about some of the worst trains on the island, but today, we're gonna discuss the best, the goodest of engines on Sir Topham Hatt's railway. Unless you're British, in which case you call him the Fat Controller, and get really mad whenever we in America say Sir Topham Hatt, even though we are calling him Sir out of politeness, and you are calling him Fat. So which one of us is just being rude, is what I'm trying to say. In any event, these are 5 of the best trains on the island of Sodor. Percy. Percy is one of the most popular engines on the island, and he's actually Thomas's best friend. But unlike Thomas, who seems to find a way to get himself into trouble pretty much every other day, Percy is a lot more well-behaved, and even when he does have the occasional accident, it's usually not because he was being an idiot. Percy does his best, and in many cases he's been able to be a little bit heroic. There was of course the time that the island suffered severe flooding, so bad that it affected his firebox, but he still was able to power through it. He was, in fact, brought to the island in the first place because Gordon, James, and Henry went on strike because tender engines don't shunt. So Sir Topham Hatt had to bring in Percy to do a lot of the extra work. And he did a fine job. He's also a bit unique, as in the technical sense, Percy doesn't have a basis. He's a saddle tank engine, but there are a lot of saddle tanks that look like him, but aren't quite him. He's a distinctive, almost custom engine, though he has been compared to the class Trojans of the Great Western Railway. But at no point does he identify with the Great Western, so it's a bit unclear exactly what his origins are, but he is a fine engine who does a solid job as best he can. Duck! Otherwise known as Montague, but basically nobody calls him that, everyone just calls him Duck, because apparently he waddles, but that hasn't stopped him from being one of the hardest workers on the island. He is a former Great Western Railway engine, and is in fact a 57XX class 060 pannier tank engine. Duck's strong work ethic is one of his finest traits, and interesting ability to generally avoid accidents. Even when he lost control of a freight train, he was able to slow it down enough, to the point that when he ran into a barber shop, he did so gently enough that he didn't kill anybody inside. His efforts prevented a serious accident, and while he does have a lot of pride on his shoulders, thinking that it's either the Great Western Way or the wrong way, much to everyone else's annoyance, you can't deny that he is truly effective. The only thing that puts Duck a little lower on the list is that he does on occasion play a little prank. But to be fair, usually when that happens, the other engine totally asked for it. Like when he blocked the tender engines from getting into the sheds because they were being jerks. But he is considered one of the best engines on the island. BoCo. A diesel on the best engine list. What? No! But yeah, while BoCo's basis, the Class 28 Kobo, is just awful, BoCo's been re-engined, and makes up for the failings of his siblings by being just a really good guy. Like, especially by diesel standards. Most diesels on Sodor tend to have a superiority complex over the steam engines, but BoCo from the very start was never like that. He always treated the steam engines as equals, earning the respect of many of them as a result. He always does his best, he always works hard, and he's actually considered a mentor of Mavis, which probably explains why she's generally a lot nicer to the steam engines too, though her childish attitude in some cases bumps her off the list, despite being one of my favorite characters. BoCo, on the other hand, is extremely level-headed, always handling things in a mature way, and giving sound advice to diesel and steam engine alike. He also managed to wrangle Bill and Ben, and if you know anything about those two, that is not a sentence one gets to say very often. but he dealt with them without complaint, and continues to set a fine example of how good diesels can be on the island, if the rest of them would stop being jerks for just, 2 seconds. That's all I'm saying. Toby. Toby's a GER class C-53 tram engine, reclassified J-70 by London and Northeastern, but they're the same kind. He's distinctive, as despite being a steam engine, he just doesn't look like it at first glance unless you know what a tram engine is. He's very, square, with side skirts and cow catchers, but this allows him to safely operate on lines where there's a lot more foot traffic nearby. He worked on his own tramway for years until they closed down, and sadly, despite being a hard-working, kind engine, he was to be left abandoned in a garage. But fortunately for him, just prior to the closure of his line, he would pull a train occupied by one Sir Topham Hatt, as well as his family. Sir Topham Hatt was so impressed with Toby, and found himself in need of a tram engine for his own rail line, that when he realized Toby was up for sale, he ran to purchase him. And Toby's been safe on the island of Sodor ever since. He's close friends with both Percy and Thomas, and tends to be the voice of reason between those two when they bicker, as he is indeed the older one. Edward. Oh, here he is. It's ya boy. The man, the myth, the legend. The best engine on the island of Sodor. I don't care what anyone else has to say about this. Edward. And why? Because he's just the goodest boy. Seriously. Edward's a heavily modified K2 class, a type of locomotive that dates back to 1896. This makes him one of the oldest engines on the island, and yet that hasn't stopped him from doing his best at any given moment in time. He's one of the hardest workers by far, and exceedingly wise, always willing to give advice. He runs his own branch line, alongside BoCo, in fact, and the two seem to get along extremely well, probably due to their own respective level-headed natures. But the reason Edward is number one is not just because he's a hard worker and a good guy. I mean, that's part of it, of course, but also, this dude is legendary due to multiple feats of heroics. I mean, he was already pretty awesome when Gordon, Henry, and James decided to strike because tender engines don't shunt, and Edward, despite being a tender engine, was like, no, I'm gonna shunt. But then there was a situation where James ran away, and Edward had to chase him down. Now, James is a much newer engine and capable of much higher speeds. Edward nearly broke himself chasing James down, but he did pull it off. But even that isn't my favorite Edward moment. My personal favorite story involving Edward was when he was pulling a train in stormy conditions, but he suffered a pretty major failure. His driver and firemen investigated and discovered that one of his crank pins had broke. To compensate for this, they took off his side rods. And this is a problem, because this would basically cut Edward's tractive effort in half. Only one set of his drivers was actually powered anymore, and he could no longer pull the train, at least at first. But Edward was still willing to try, so his driver and firemen made some adjustments to the couplers on the coaches. They loosened them, and this allowed Edward to pull one at a time, with the first helping to start the second, and the second helping to start the third. In that way, he was able to get the train started again, and despite being late, he got those people home. And while Sir Topham Hatt was angry at first, the passengers cheered, knowing how hard Edward had to push himself in order to get them safely to the station. Edward is awesome, okay? And he still remains a highlight of Sodor to this very day. If it were real. But it's not. April Fools! And with that, a special thank you to all my underwater train finders, Some Dude 267, Orange Glass, Benjamin Owens, Anzac A1, Arthur Roy, Brian, Jack, Carson's Railroad Videos, Lord Off 444, A Person 723, Royal Hudson 2860, Isifer 1405, Charles Kwiatkowski, Matt Weaver, Tom Red Lion, Ennis Productions 8104, Wheeljack 8401, Rescues Greyhounds, The Baxter, Caleb Crosswhite, Andrew Bowen, Josh Johnson, Caleb Rainwaters, Perez Drenton, Master of None, Travis Dolinsky, Jared Brussel, Joshua Long, Tommy Rossini, Ben McCullough, Panzer Kitsune 131-232, Mark Holding, Dr. Racer 78, G Wiz, Mr. Terevel, Liam Wright, Hayden DeGrow, Metal for Life Guy, Battle 604, Hannah Bird, Railroad Preserver 2000, No, Eric Hutton, Williard Conklin, Kurt Forkham, Ohio Trucker 1, Mitchell Cole, and of course, my dad. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.